Welcome, everybody, to Your Gifts Matter. We're here today with Fatima Zaidi from Project Instigate. She's the owner of this organization. She's also an acclaimed TEDx speaker. Really happy to have you here today, Fatima, and looking forward to hearing more about your gifts and what you bring to the world.
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm really excited to talk about how to educate, inspire, and guide professionals into accessing their inner gifts. And I really appreciate that you thought of me for this podcast. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about as well. So thank you for having me.
No, you're welcome. Welcome. I'm looking forward for you to be able to share your story. And as as we've talked about, really today we're going to take people on a bit of a journey. So we're going to go back into the past a bit, and this whole idea is for our guest to be able, like you, to be able to share about the struggles you've had and what you've been able to access to where you are today. So going a bit from the past, specific struggles in your life. A lot of times those struggles tend to be when we're kids. Doesn't necessarily have to be, but it could be, in those adolescence years. And then what were those gifts, those gifts, those talents, abilities that you were able to access along the way? Okay. So why don't we just kick it off and why don't you just share a little bit about yourself, who you are and where you've come from.
Okay. My name is Fatima. You guys know that. I am the owner of Project Instigate. It's my organization that helps people with their leadership, learning, and personal growth strategy. My personal mission in life is to help inspire people to become, and also empower them to become leaders in their lives and their communities, and help them create change in change that is really in alignment with their values. So that's what I like to do. I'm from Chilliwack. However, from childhood to now, I have actually moved quite a bit. So I was born and raised in Iran. I was born in Qom, and then we moved to Tehran, and we were there for quite a bit. I moved from Tehran to Pakistan when I was around 11 and a half and 12 years old. We stayed in Pakistan for 2 years. And then we came to Canada when I was around 13 years old. And we've been here since then. There was a brief period of time where, we went to Germany as well. It was only for a few months, but what had happened was when I was coming to Canada, or when we were coming to Canada, my dad got a job in Germany, but our visa for Canada got approved at the same time. So my dad ended up having to go to Germany. So we still had some income coming in, and my mom, my brother, and I, we came to Canada. And during summer times, my dad would come visit, but there was one summer that we ended up going to Germany. And one thing I didn't know, and I found out after I went to Germany, was my dad was hoping we would really like Germany and possibly stay there. So we stayed there a few months. I even went to schooling there. But for me personally, their education system just didn't sit well with me. And I was really wanting to graduate from my high school, which, I mean, after moving around, I'd finally felt like I was settling in. So we moved back to Canada, and my dad ended up moving there as well. And here we are still.
So that experience with going to Germany, which you thought was a vacation, was it actually like your parents had that planned all along the way, and it was just shared with you in the moment?
It sounded like it. I think they were just hoping it would be a vacation, but it would turn into just, kids like it here. It seems good, but let's just stay here. And I think one of the issues was in Germany, being there for the few months that I did, it was great. The one thing that I personally didn't like is, in terms of education, a lot of people talk about how, Germany has free education. But one thing people don't like to talk about is not everyone has access to equal education. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on, education system in Germany. I was only there for a few months, so this is just my experience from going to high school there. But basically, depending on how you do in elementary school, it determines which middle school you will go to. And depending on how you do in middle school, depends on which high school you will go to. And that high school will literally determine what career you end up in. So from a very young age, if you don't excel, you may be put into a direction that, you may not be able to reach your careers. There's some schools that if you go to them, getting to university from there is just, almost impossible. And
What was
then
that like?
Hmm?
So what was that like to realize that all of a sudden your schooling was all of a sudden very structured, right? It was just all of a sudden this path that was, it sounds like forced upon you, that this is, depending on how you progress in the system, like you're going to have to go a certain way. Like, what was that experience like to all of a sudden know, any freedom you have of doing what you really want to do is somewhat taken away? Like, what was that like to?
Well, it wasn't, I knew I had a lot more potential, and
Yeah.
I, to be honest, excuse me, as someone who was new to Germany, I also felt that there was a little bit of discrimination in terms of being put into one of the schools that weren't that great. And what happened in this school is they said, if you're new to Canada, you have to learn German before you are actually put into a class with regular kids. So all the kids that were immigrants were put into this separate class that was separate from the entire school. And in our class, we had kids all the way from grade 5 to grade 12 studying the same thing. And it was about, you learn the language and then you get to attend the regular school, which is counterintuitive because you learn faster when you're actually, part of the culture and part of the language. And so it was, trying to teach the same course and making sure that kids in grade 5 understand it just as well as kids in grade 12 understand it. Our assignments were ridiculous. Like,
Right.
I actually walked over to the teacher's desk to ask her a question, and I see, a picture on her desk, and it had 6 dolphins on it. And when I looked more carefully, I said, what is that? Wait, that's not a dolphin. That one has alligator legs. That's not a dolphin. That has human legs. That's not a dolphin. It had, they were all like morphed into dolphin combined with other animals. And the teacher was just sitting there shocked. And she's like, how did you know these are dolphins? And I said, because I know what a dolphin looks like. And so she's like, but there's about almost 30 students in this class. I can guarantee you not a single one will be able to pick out a dolphin. And I said, you're kidding. She's like, no, just watch. She hands out the assignment and she says, okay, your goal is to find which one of these 6 or 8 dolphins is a real dolphin. For the next 30 minutes, I watched the class just scrambling, trying to figure out which one is a real dolphin. And that was the nature of our assignments every single day. And
So what was that like for you to know that you that you were unique in the classroom and being able to understand that exercise and what did that feel like?
I was in grade 10 and I felt like I'm in kindergarten. It was
Right.
It was crazy. And I think it really highlights, it's like, you're the average of 5 people you spend most time with. And that became most evident to me in that class. It's not that those students weren't smart. It's the curriculum that was being taught to them. It was outrageous. Like, you're trying to put a 5th grader with a 12th grader and you're trying to teach them all the same thing. You end up learning shapes. What is a square? What is a rectangle? In grade 12. And by the way, this was just for people who didn't know German.
Right.
Once they move into regular system, they would suddenly, now they have assimilated to this level of education, and then they'd have a second set of, assimilation into learning regular curriculum. So
Wow.
that was my main reason why I said, there's no way I'm staying in Germany. I'm going back to Canada, and attending a regular school.
That's pretty,
So
that's some great awareness for you. I don't know if I, in grade 10 would have had that initiative to say, this is not working, and to know that, something needs to change. That says a lot about who you are, and recognizing that, you need to be part of, an education environment you can thrive in. Right. I know that you've
I
also,
could genuinely,
yeah,
I could genuinely feel my intellect declining over those
right.
3 months.
Yeah.
It was quite the experience. And again, like I said, it's not that the kids in that class weren't smart.
Yeah.
It just, they'd been around that kind of curriculum for so long that was the norm, and that's what they adapted to. And so the quote that says you're an average of 5 people you spend most time with,
Right.
is just so important to me. And we talk about spending time with people who are more successful than you, people who are like, there's this, a lot of people say if you're the smartest person in your group, you need to find a different group. It just became abundantly
Yeah.
clear to me going to that class and that school.
Yeah. And I know that, our conversation leading up to this interview, you'd mentioned that you'd experienced a fair bit of bullying throughout
Oh
your
my
school
gosh.
days. So can you share a bit
Yeah.
about that?
Well, every time you're the new kid, you go through a little bit of bullying, and I have changed. I mean, I think I've lost count of how many schools I've changed, but definitely going from not just country to country, but I've also moved within cities in the country, and all of that it was all starting new, always being the new kid, always getting started again, and always starting from scratch. So when I first came to Canada, but I didn't have language barriers because I did grow up very multilingual. So I spoke English before I came to Canada, and I spoke it quite fluently. I grew up with English, Urdu, and Farsi at the same time.
Wow. Yeah.
And so when I came to Canada, um, it was more of a culture shock, right? Even like things like seeing a sky train for the first time, or, I would see kids kissing in the hallway, and I would just stop and think, am I in a movie or something? Because I haven't actually seen this in person.
Mhm.
So a lot of things were new, and I think there was a lot of culture shock. There was especially a lot of peer pressure around dating, and I wasn't comfortable dating. And so I felt like I went through a lot of bullying, and just in general understanding new system, new culture. I went through different types of bullyings. So verbal, like just kids making fun of me just with my clothes and things like that. I went through, typical things where kids are, being chosen last for sports team in gym, kids throwing basketballs at me. Not all of them, but there's always a particular group of bullies every time. In math class, actually, they put me in math essentials initially, but it's below principles. Principal is the standard that you need. And I was just really bored in math essentials, and I really had to put no effort in, and I got straight A's. So then I was bullied for getting A's. So then I intentionally dropped my grades, so I
Mhm.
stopped getting bullied. And then I got bullied for not being as smart, because suddenly my grades were lower. And then the worst of all, I think, was in electronics and metalwork class. I had a group of boys that would, they would steal my stuff just because they thought it would be funny, and throw it in the garbage. Someone would walk right over and take everything off my desk and just swipe it off the desk and onto the floor. It got to a point that I actually had to wear a really big jacket with pockets in electronics and metalworks class, which wasn't safe, but it was to keep all my belongings on me at all times so they don't get taken away from me. There was this one kid, he tried to actually clamp my hand into the welding machine and turn it on. And I, managed to like pull it away. And I did go to the teacher and I said, this is what happened to me. And her response was, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Right. And so it was quite a bit of a challenge in
Yeah.
terms of bullying for school. I think
That
it went
sounds,
on for first 2 to 3 years.
yeah, that sounds really tough. Like it's not
Yeah.
there's the verbal bullying. It sounds like there's this physical bullying happening. So how did you cope? Like going through that, like how did you cope? And it sounds like, one of the things you had to do was to get very creative and wear that jacket so that you had all your belongings on you. But, internally, like from a mental standpoint, your mental wellness standpoint, like how did you cope through that? And
It was hard because, when you're being bullied, you feel like you can't tell anyone, because if you tell someone, then bullying's going to get worse, right? And I think the way I dealt with bullying was a lot of it, I had to access my inner gifts, which we'll speak more about later as well. But, just being able to, um, just being first of all, a lot of it was just resilience. Having been the new kid so many times in so many different schools. And of course, this was the worst of all bullying, but it wasn't the first time I was bullied. So I had sort of figured my way around. But I also, as a kid, I've always kind of had a no bullshit attitude. And one of the things is I just kind of understand people, and this is not what I would advise a lot of people going through bullying, but one of the things I did was I very quickly realized is that if I were being bullied, every time I went and complained about the bully, eventually the people who are hearing me, right, they may or may not take me seriously, and they may eventually start to tune me out. So I stopped telling my teachers I was being bullied, and I took a notebook and I started recording all the incidents of bullying until I had like an entire notebook full.
right.
I wrote down the name of the person, the time, the date, where it happened. I wrote down exactly their words, like word by word. And when I had like almost a booklet full of like, evidence of bullying, I walked into the counselor's office and I submitted that. And a lot of it had to do, it took a lot of courage on my part to do that, because I knew what was coming after that. Because as soon as you tell on the bully, it actually gets worse. It does. That's, but I think it's really important to be persistent and to set your boundaries and not let people walk all over you. And I think that's something I learned from just going through so many different schools. It's something that it came from a place of just being fed up. I got to a point where I was like, I'm done, this is enough, it's not going to happen anymore.
So what changed? How did you get to that point? How did you get to the point to say, I'm done, I'm fed up with this? Like what actually changed for you to realize that you needed to take a different stand?
Because nothing else was changing. And I think it's a really good question. So what got me to the point of, I think we all have limits. We all have that final straw, and I think I hit that final straw. Because I've gone through a lot of bullying, and by far, I mean, if every single day you're dealing with physical, verbal, you're dealing with emotional, and it just it's almost something that I can't put into words.
Yeah.
But I felt like it had gone on long enough that I felt like I've had enough and I won't tolerate it anymore. But I don't think it just came to that. I think a lot of it has to do with the values that I grew up with and what I was taught. I was taught to fight back. I was taught to not be the victim. And I think it has a lot to do with mindset as well. So for example, I have never, ever, ever seen myself as a victim of anything. So someone might say, oh, you were a victim of bullying. And I immediately stop them and I say, no, I was bullied, but I was never a victim of bullying, right? It's how you think of it. And it's a character trait I've had from a young age, and it's because of, just the family values that I grew up with. But I never, it's about taking control of your power. And it has to do with your mindset and the confidence. And you hear often, fake it till you make it, and there's a lot of debate about whether or not that's good or bad, whether that's authentic. And I can actually think of many scenarios in which I had to say, I had to fake it till I made it. Fake it like I wasn't afraid of bullies, fake it like I wasn't in any danger. And sometimes I had to exaggerate my emotions to get the counselor, the teacher, to really get attention towards the fact that I was, being bullied. And so a lot of that happened, but I think it comes down to mindset, and it comes down to the values that I grew up with.
Yeah. And
I hope I answered your question.
for sure, for sure. I'm curious if you look back and reflect on the experience you've had around bullying and that in your life, like would you actually fake it still, or would you take a different approach?
Well, first, in terms of my confidence, my resilience, and just what I did and how I handled bullying, I didn't fake it. But what I had to fake was, I guess, when in the moment of being bullied, faking that I'm not afraid, faking that I'm not scared.
Yeah.
I
So
think, I still would. I have to say, I actually, there was a time when I was considering being a correctional officer, because I did my degree in criminology. And so I took a job as a security guard. And in my job, I was put on a site that was still under construction. There were no lighting there. I was the only person working alone at night. That was a place where, not to go into too much depth, but I started getting followed by this guy who was a drug dealer and a pimp. And, he was also a murderer. I found out later that he had murdered someone on that site, and he had started following me. And to get through that shift, I had to fake it till I made it. I walked around with a not a fake walkie-talkie, it was a real walkie-talkie, it just didn't work. I just pretended to have conversations on it, like I wasn't alone. On the site, I had to walk with confidence, even though I had, like, my whole body was just shaking from fear. I had to call backup. They came, the person disappeared, then they left again, right? So I dealt with this, and the next day I talked to my supervisor and I said, it's not safe for me to work here anymore and I have to leave. So when I say fake it till you make it, I really want to emphasize that I'm not telling people to not be authentic and genuine, right? I'm not saying, like, if you're a working professional or if you're a business owner, you need to be authentic in your marketing, you need to be true to who you are. For me, that really only worked in a situation where I was genuinely in danger. Faking confidence got me through a lot of those really fearful moments. And some people wouldn't even say fear or call it fear, but I don't want to get into that debate. And I think in extreme situations like that, that really helped me.
Yeah. And, and what I hear you saying, when you're talking about faking it till you make it, I hear you saying that you embrace the qualities of who you actually wanted to be and who you are, right? And so that you essentially shifted your beliefs that right now in this moment I am confident, right? I am resilient, and it, in some ways, it can be looked at as faking it, but really you're actually empowering and embracing those qualities as though you own them, and then in a sense you do own them, right? And it's just shifting the belief that you, in that moment, you can embrace that confidence and that resiliency, creativity, whatever it be. Yeah. So
I think that's very true, because for me, because having gone through some of these traumas, it's really hard for me to describe them and explain them and be able to put them very or in the best words, I guess, because as I'm describing these I do feel like I'm living through them a little bit. So trying to think through, okay, what really happened? And at the same time, trying to put that into the best words possible is a bit of a challenge in itself. But I think I really do believe that it comes down to the fact that I was always a very, like, I developed the skill of being confident as a child because of moving around so much and having to start all over every time I felt like, okay, now things aren't going to change. And I think that created a certain level of confidence in me. But also, I was continuously pushed outside of my comfort zone. And so it became something that I became quite comfortable with, because if I did it enough times, that I wasn't afraid of change anymore. I wasn't afraid of uncertainty anymore.
Yeah.
And I became more, because the environment around me changed so much, there was something very consistent within me and who I was that I started to notice more and more of.
For sure. Yeah. Let's talk more about that. So if you were to, and I'm curious if you want to highlight some of these family values that you talked about earlier, but
Mm-hmm.
the gifts and these talents and abilities that you access, and I know you've alluded to them already, and it'd be good just to share them again, is, what is internal to you that you were able to access throughout your life and continue today, that are truly gifts in the moments of those struggles, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I just need just one moment to think about it, because it's a very deep question.
Yeah.
So I think one of my gifts has been that, uh, just developing. And here's the thing, I don't believe that we're just, there are certain things that, genetic, but most are environmental. And I don't believe that I was born with any of these traits. I mean, these are things that were just developed over time, just having gone through the struggles that I did. But overall, I think I also always surrounded myself with the right people. I surrounded myself with good mentors. And a lot of these were just learned behaviors, like how I watched my dad go through certain challenges, how I watched different family members as a child. And then as I started growing up, with finding the right teachers to be mentors, finding the right friends, and kind of taking their best quality on.
So how did
And
you
it's
know, sorry to interrupt you. How did you
Mhm.
know to surround yourself by others? Was it just watching your dad and your,
It was people who I saw something about them, and they genuinely inspired me, and I thought, you know what, I want to be more like that person. So what can I do to be around them more, you
so
know
what quality do you possess to know to do that, would you
I
say?
think one of those is self-efficacy. For
Yeah.
example, my
Okay.
belief in being able to execute things and getting things done,
Okay.
that I've definitely learned from my dad.
Hmm.
Another one I've like, this is a specific skill as opposed to deeper quality, but I'm going to say public speaking. I grew up watching my family members, especially my dad, doing public speaking from a very young age. It was completely normal for me. For me, speaking wasn't something scary. Well, not that, it doesn't make me nervous, but the thing is, I grew up watching it so much that, um, you know, it became a normal thing for me, and it's something I just always knew I will do, and I never really thought about it. So the first time ever, I actually started public speaking at the age of seven
Wow.
and a half. And that was the first time I spoke in front of my school's assembly, and at that time I was just hooked. So, and I think that public speaking as a skill, and just being able to stand up in front of people and be able to deliver a message, and having the right mentors in my life, like especially my dad, to model that for me on how to do it well, has had a huge influence on me. And then through this skill, doing it over and over again, because public speaking has been one of my it's actually one of my favorite, it is my most favorite thing to do. I love being on stage. I love I feel the most authentic, the most genuine. I feel the happiest when I'm public speaking. And a lot of my skills around having self-efficacy, having confidence, having, having the courage to try something different, it's all come from that. So it did start as, me surrounding myself with people who just did that on a regular basis. And I think the best way to maybe try something new or to push yourself outside your comfort zone is to dive right in and throw yourself in an environment. So let me provide a more practical example. Okay, let's say you want to reach a goal. Okay, um, now I mentioned earlier you're an average of 5 people you spend most time with, and I find myself saying this a lot, but think outside the people you're physically around. What about your social media? Who's your Facebook friend? Who are you subscribing to YouTube? Who are you? What Facebook groups have you joined? Who are you following on Instagram, on LinkedIn? All those people are influencing you at this moment, even more so than people who are physically around you, right?
Yeah, I know.
Because
I
you
hear that. I
spend.
hear that. There's something to be said about, the music that we listen to, the movies that we're watching, the books that we're reading,
Mhm.
the news that we're subscribing to. Like all
It,
that
it,
stuff impacts our environment, right? So that I
mhm.
hear you, but that's
Yeah.
really good information for people to
So.
be aware of. And the public speaking front, like it's not a
Mhm.
natural thing for most people, and it for you to say that you love it, like that's amazing. And there's the qualities to access to do that, as you said, like the confidence,
Mhm.
the courage, because a lot of people, and myself included, I struggled with it for many years. uh, and I'm curious, like, do you still get nervous when you speak, or do you step into it and you are fully confident when you get up there and present? Or
So when it comes to public speaking now, when it comes to public speaking, I do feel like I got lucky having family members who do public
yeah,
speaking, and I grew up watching them. So that's a privilege that I've had. It's not that I don't get nervous. I reframe it as excitement, right? So, for
yeah,
example, even when I was younger, what was nervousness? I was never introduced to the concept of nervousness,
mm.
right? And so I always thought I'm excited. And now I realize, oh, I'm actually nervous. And now I hear public speaking coaches and they're telling you to actually reframe it as excitement. And I'm like, well, I've been doing that all my
You've
life.
already been doing it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
And
it's
so
yeah,
I
there's something
hear
to be
you.
said about that, because the feeling of excitement and the feeling of nervousness can be
Mhm.
the same thing, right?
But
And
let
and,
me
and you're
say
right.
this. Let me say this for people who have not grown up with public speaking, right? We get too deep into our heads. Like for me, if you think about it, I wasn't really introduced to the concept of nervousness around public speaking, so I didn't think I had it, right? And so when you are afraid of public speaking, think about how powerful our mind is and how easily you can actually reframe that. Now, I can't obviously make you unknow something that you already know, but really, like, whether it's meditation, whether it's something else, like, you don't have to be born in a family that does public speaking. You don't have to have grown up public speaking since the age of 7. But what you can take out of this is the mindset piece, right? It's a mindset that was put in my mind as a child. It was something that was made normal for me. So what can you do to make it normal for you, right? Can you make more friends that do public speaking? Can you push yourself outside your comfort zone to be doing more public speaking? Impromptu public speaking will definitely boost your confidence.
Yeah.
And the more you do it, the more confident you'll get, and you'll be able to get there, right? Yeah.
That's great advice, Fatima. I really appreciate that, because that can really help people, that may want to be doing that. Because I know for myself, I was looking at going to a Toastmasters group for probably 5 years, and searching for one. And then when the time came to actually attend one, I would just not go, right? I would not attend. And it wasn't until somebody highlighted the fact that if you go to a meeting, you don't actually have to present. You can just be there as a guest and just watch. And that enough was the comfort for me to know that, okay, I can just go there and see what the environment's like before I have to participate. So, so I would love to hear more about, like, we're going through the COVID-19 global pandemic right now. So how are you, why don't you highlight how you're helping people, with the products and services you provide during this time and beyond?
Well, for example, right now, one of the things I'm doing is I'm organizing online seminars on different topics that are related to leadership and personal growth. We organized one on self-care. We organized one on letting go of fear and focusing on things you can control and things you can't. And our most recent one was around how to build genuine human connection. I have a couple more coming around. The information on those will be out on my website and on Project Instigate's page soon. But one of the things I'm doing to help people through this pandemic is organizing online seminars that they can attend to help them get out of their mind, to shift their focus on something positive for a change. So that is the main thing that's happening for me right now.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're helping with what you talked about earlier about that mind shift, right? That mindset shift, and helping people who may be looking to embrace these qualities that and gifts that you have around resiliency and courage and creativity, is what I'm hearing. And this knowing that, you can believe in the, the abilities that you want to embrace, right? And you can actually access them. It's just shifting that mindset around it, right? So how can people find you? How can people find you online and learn more about these sessions that you're doing?
So you can find me a few different ways. You can find my business, Project Instigate, right there. I'll move to the side so you can see it.
Right.
So you can find it on Facebook, Project Instigate. You can also go to my website, which is projectinstigate.com. And, you can email me as well, which is Fatima, Fatima .Zaidi, Zaidi, at projectinstigate.com.
Perfect. So just to close things out, is there, one key thing, one key message you'd want to leave with our audience today?
Yeah, the one thing I want to leave with is, don't be afraid of trying new things. And to be honest, if you have any kind of fear or anxiety around something, the only way to get it over with is to jump right into it. And it's not that you're hiding it's not that your fear isn't there. It just, and I think when I say, positivity is great, but there's something I don't like about sometimes it going too far where it doesn't acknowledge genuine human emotions. So I'm not going to say be positive. What I'm going to say is you're going to be afraid, and acknowledge that fear, right? And tell yourself, I am afraid, but it's okay. I'm still choosing to try this, or, whatever kind of language works for you. You can craft something that works for you, but acknowledge your fear, but then tell yourself that you're going to do it anyways. And when that voice in the back of your head starts talking and says, what if it doesn't work? What if this happened? What if this happens? Then you say, well, there's only one way to find out, and that's by doing it. And you just go ahead and do it. And I learned this by moving around so much in my life. I was continuously forced into circumstances outside my comfort zone in a way that, I didn't choose to. I was forced into it. The choice, I feel like that's a big thing. I value choice because I feel like most of my life, choice was taken out of me. But
so
so jumping in and making the choice to, jump into things that make you afraid.
So let's say we have somebody that's listening that does want to, enhance their public speaking skills, and they've been really fearful of doing it. And so if jumping into it is needed, probably what I'm hearing you saying is it doesn't necessarily mean jumping into it means going out and talking in front of 100 people right off the bat. So if somebody is wanting to improve their public speaking skills, what is that first step? What is a simple step that they can take to jump into it?
showing up to a Toastmasters meeting.
Okay.
So what you want to do is you want to stack successes on top of each other. I'm not saying the first time around, go speak in front of 1,000 people. I mean, if you do, I'm proud of you, right? Good job.
Yeah.
But, you want to build successes, not failures. So the first step is showing up to a meeting. Second step is maybe speaking at that meeting. And then here's what I see a lot of people get caught up in Toastmasters. They end up becoming comfortable with their Toastmasters group, and they become okay with public speaking in that group, but then they never leave that group. Don't get comfortable. Get out and do public speaking in the real world outside of that Toastmasters group. Go to business or just general networking events. Maybe walk up to a stranger and say hi to them. The next time you go to a place where there's a group of people, don't go straight to the friends you know. Walk over to someone you don't know and introduce yourself. All these things will build confidence. You don't have to build confidence by standing on a stage. Everyday little things you're doing to push yourself outside your comfort zone and speaking to people will get you there.
Sounds great. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Fatima, and sharing your story. You shared a lot about your story, which not a lot of people are comfortable doing that, and I really appreciate you bringing all of you to here today, and being able to highlight those true gifts, those inner gifts that you accessed all along the way, and it sounds like are accessing even today. And again, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm actually really glad that I came today as well. And actually, if it's okay, I did want to any of your listeners, I wanted to offer a 1-hour success strategy session. So if it's public speaking or reaching any kind of goals that you want to achieve, if you send me an email, at fatima.zaidi@projectinstigate.com, and just let me know that you came here from Aaron's podcast, I will offer you a free success strategy session.
That's great. Great. Thanks again for your time.
Okay, you're most welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.